All right. So the movie for this week is Easy Rider, and I'm just going to read here briefly from Wikipedia, kind of an introduction to it. Easy Rider is a 1969 American independent road drama film written by Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper, and Terry Southern. It's produced by Fonda and directed by Hopper. Fonda and Hopper play two bikers who travel through the American Southwest and South, carrying the proceeds from a cocaine deal. The success of Easy Rider helped spark the new Hollywood era of filmmaking during the early 1970s. A landmark counterculture film and a touchstone for a generation that captured the national imagination. Easy Rider explores the societal issues and tensions towards adolescence in the United States during the 1960s, such as the rise of the hippie movement, drug use, and communal lifestyle. Real drugs were used in scenes showing the use of marijuana and other substances. Released by Columbia Pictures on July 14th, 1969, Easy Rider earned $60 million worldwide from a modest filming budget of $400,000. Critics have praised the performances, directing, writing, soundtracks, and visual. It received 2 Academy Award nominations for Best Original Screenplay and Best Supporting Actor by Jack Nicholson. In 1968, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. So I kind of broke it down thinking about the film this way. I was kind of, it was a short film, and it really only had, I was thinking, man, this thing, it only had a few scenes. So I was kind of breaking it down that way by the scenes, and I only came up with 10 scenes in the whole thing, and I jotted them down. There's the first scene is that the drug cartel scene where they make their money, they get the money from their drug deal. And then the second scene is where they leave for New Orleans, and head out on their bikes and all that. The third scene was the flat tire scene where they meet up and have the picnic with the family, out in the countryside. The fourth scene was the hitchhiker commune scene, which kind of reminded me of Charles Manson. In fact, when I was watching that scene, I was wondering, did Manson happen before or after this? And the answer is before. So then the fifth scene was in New Mexico, where they're in the parade, and they meet George Harrison. I think that was his name for Jack Nicholson character. They're in jail with him. Then the sixth scene is the Louisiana diner scene, where they go in there and all the different people are in there with them, the young gals, and they're probably their fathers or whatever at the other table. And then there's the seventh scene is the campfire ambush scene, where Jack Nicholson gets killed. And the eighth scene was the New Orleans brothel LSD scene. And the ninth scene was the We Blew It scene. They didn't mention that in Wikipedia. This ninth scene where they're sitting by the campfire, and he says, Hopper says, we made it, we did it, and Peter Fonda says, we blew it. And I've done some other reading about it. There's a lot of controversy about how that scene played out. And finally, the last scene was the county road shotgun scene where they get all blown to hell. But just kind of in summary, you know, as a reflective movie of the 1960s America, and it was particularly of the California and the South. But I just thought that the different scenes would probably be something that we would be reflecting on anyway. So I'm going to open it up to that. There, in reading about it in Wikipedia, there are a lot of things to pick apart on this movie if you want to, but you know, the different scenes would be a good place to start, I think. Did everybody kind of enjoy seeing it again, or?
Yeah. Hey, Jeff with a G, this is the first time you've seen it, correct?
The whole thing, yeah.
I'd like to hear your take first.
You know, I really like Jack Nicholson. That's why I picked him for my background. I mean, that scene in the jail where they first meet him and he's kind of waking up and he's all hungover and stuff. I mean, just his eyes and his mouth movement and stuff. It's classic Jack Nicholson. It was really awesome. So I really like that part. I got really pissed off when they in the South, you know, when they just get treated like garbage. And, you know, of course they get beat up and then ultimately they get, you know, blown away with a shotgun, which is, you know, it makes me want to hate the South. Because I think it's still that way. And these guys were even white. And I can't imagine the way they would have treated Black people back then. But so, you know, it left me really mad, angry, but, you know, I enjoyed the movie. A lot of druggy stuff, but Jack Nicholson was what made it for me though. But
I think it was the first time I ever saw Jack Nicholson in a movie.
That was his breakout role. He wasn't a thing until then.
I don't think he carried as much weight with me back then as it clearly does now. And that's probably based on the length and status of his career. But back then he was just kind of a sideshow to what was going on to me in the rest of the movie. Well done, just like you said, Jeff.
he probably had more dialogue than the other two.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a part of the movie.
And Peter Fonda, if he said 12 words in the thing, that'd be a surprise. But Nicholson coming out, getting released from jail and doing the nick scene, I think that's one of the classic parts of his film career.
I remember Nicholson as being comic relief in the movie.
Yeah.
But when I watched it the second time, he is the truth in the movie when he says, when they see you as free, they become dangerous. I mean, and it translates to today even more than ever. But that second fireside scene before he gets killed is to me the essence of the movie, that these guys are expressing a freedom that the rednecks in the South are not comfortable with. They don't see themselves as trapped, and the fact that these guys are free, just, you know, they go to the extremes to shut down their freedom, and he professes that before it. I mean, it's by the fireside. It's some brilliant screenwriting, and I you know, the whole movie hit me when I was 16 years old, but that scene hits me now that I'm 70 years old in a totally different way.
Well, I want to bring up what I think is the essence of the movie. I agree with you that Jack Nicholson serves as basically the Greek chorus in this, and he is the truth teller in it. I want to go to Captain America's last words here. Did we blow it? And here's the deal. All of us probably started experiencing, most of us anyway, started experiencing the counterculture to whatever degree that we adapted parts of it probably in late 69 or 1970. It wasn't much of a factor in a lot of the Midwest. And so by the time Peter Fonda says we blew it, he's looking back at, I think, the collective counterculture movement of the '60s that saw a rise in the counterculture and hippies and the youth movement and all those sorts of things that were important at that time. And then just a few months later, a lot of people will mention that if Woodstock was the apex of the youth movement, that Altamont and the murders there were the death of the '60s. Well, we didn't even begin to experience any of that stuff, most of us, the counterculture stuff, until after Peter Fonda declares that they've blown it, that they weren't able to escape. Their culture didn't take over. They didn't do the things to America that they thought they would, although so there are lingering vestiges of it. And so I think that when he says we blew it, he's talking about the '60s, and that even though this came late to all of us, starting in '69 and '70, he was saying the movement was already over. And
so he was bookending the Summer of Love and saying,
yeah, I think in fact he's the one quote I've read from him said he meant that line to be pretty enigmatic, and but he also added in the next sentence, "Look out your window right now," and he said this within probably the last 10 years of his life. Look out your window. Do you think that we haven't blown it just by looking around at society? So I think that's what he was saying, was that while we were just becoming of age, he was observing that the moment had already passed. My thought. Anybody agree? Disagree? What?
yeah, no, that's a good point.
I think
it's great.
pretty right on. I know that Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda, they do not have real friendly relationships, and a lot of it revolved around this movie over the years. And Dennis Hopper wanted Peter Fonda to do this last scene, we blew it. He wanted him to go into much more detail about it. And when he did, he said, "Okay, I'll do it." And then they got to the scene, and he goes, "We blew it." And he said, "I saw this YouTube with Peter Fonda the other night." He said, after I did that, I looked over at Dennis Hopper, and he was just scowling on his face because he was so mad. He said you can actually see it in the movie, that he was so mad that Peter Fonda didn't go into the detail that he wanted him to do. So, I mean, like Mike surmises, we blew it. Probably right is what he's saying, but Dennis Hopper sure wanted him to go into a lot more detail.
Yeah,
and a tumultuous relationship for a long time after the movie too. Hopper sued Fonda. I think all the way to Hopper's death, they weren't speaking. So right before
Fonda
he
got
died,
kicked out of his funeral.
Yeah. So
really, I hadn't heard that. And there was also a lot of hard feelings on Terry Southern's behalf because he thought that Hopper claimed a writing credit for just some ad-lib lines, and Southern always believed that he carried most of the water on actually writing the screenplay.
So
that's what I read.
I think this subject we could probably discuss for the whole hour, maybe two. I would like to point out that one, the Vietnam War stopped because of the war protests, and that the '60s are considered one of the major turning points, cultural revolutionary times in history. So what got blown? You know, it's like, I think we could go on. I don't know if we should spend a lot of time because we're going to, you know, there's a lot of other stuff to talk about in this movie, but, you know, the whole question is, what is it that got blown? You know,
Well,
so.
you know, one thing is, I think that, you know, like I was going to ask to dissect the different scenes, but, you know, the hippie scene, for instance, was, to me, it was like a clear reflection of the Charlie Manson things. And the result of Charles Manson, hippie California free love was tragic. And he could have been talking about that part of it. He could have been talking about the Deep South and how terribly segregated it was, how, you know, just the attitudes of the people towards the youth, things like that.
Didn't you say Easy Rider came out in July of '69?
Yeah.
Well, the Manson murders were August of '69.
Right. I was just about to point that out.
And then, of course, when they were having this conversation, it was still '69, and they didn't know that the effect of the movement had on the war. Now it's still that's still 6 years down the road.
Well,
So they didn't know that. So,
68.
yeah, and then if you guys ever heard, I don't know when this was, but there was a parade somewhere in San Francisco or LA where they buried the hippie. It was the funeral of the hippie. There was a parade and a mock funeral for the hippie. And I'm not sure when that was. But
I think that was a little bit later on. I think that was a couple of years later, but it was there. But you know, the movement against the Vietnam War was already well underway. The ecology movement, the environmental movement, didn't really take hold until Earth Day in 1970. You can make a pretty good case that, you know, we made great strides in race relations, and then you can make a pretty good case that the strides that were made in race relations, you know, still have a long way to go. You know, I think you can say that the country is probably more racist in the last 15 years than it was in 1972. There's definitely things that happened that lingered, and there are vestiges of it from them. But the idea that I'm trying to think of the old Hunter Thompson line about the wave cresting on the hills of the Rocky Mountains. That was the high point of the movement, which I think is what Fonda says when he with his line, "We blew it." I'm not saying that there weren't good things that came from it, by no stretch of the imagination, but you know, it didn't fulfill itself, is what I think Fonda was saying, and I think there's a lot of truth to it.
yeah, so back to the Jack Nicholson thing, his appearance on the screen is right up there with Leonardo DiCaprio and Gwyneth Paltrow walking onto the screen and What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and you're going, oh shit, here's some things to contend with, as well as when Brad Pitt first showed up in Thelma and Louise. It was just one of these things, and you see this person and you know that they're going to be a big deal. I mean, I did. I kind of felt it. So, yeah, it was funny, and it's one of my favorite all-time quotes of any movie. You mean marijuana? So
Also, he was in 5 Easy Pieces, I think 1970.
Yeah, right after this.
Right after this, and then there was one more. It was called The Recruit or something like that, where he was a Navy guy that had to take Randy Quaid to prison.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember the title of it either, but
That's both of them are pretty good movies by themselves as little independent movies, which is what they were at the time. But then after that, just
Last Detail.
Yeah.
Last Detail.
Last Detail. There you go. Yeah, I thought that was a great movie.
Great movie.
But anyway, anybody notice that Phil Spector was in this movie?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was the drug guy at the first.
I didn't,
Uh-huh.
with the
I didn't know who
airplanes.
Phil Spector was when I saw it in 1969, but I now
Right. I
know who
didn't
he
either.
is, and it's loaded with meaning now. Yeah.
He's in jail, Jeff.
He was in jail.
Did
He's
he
dead
murder
now.
somebody?
Is he out?
Oh, he's dead.
Permanent.
Oh, he's dead. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Still dead.
He was,
Like Imelda.
he got convicted of murdering someone.
So
It wasn't even his girlfriend. It was just kind of a date for the night.
I want to hear from Jeff Copeland, but I watched this movie with subtitles, and during the Steppenwolf Born to Be Wild, the line "Fire all your guns at once" gets translated into "Buy all your guns at once."
Okay, then.
Now it's modernized.
Rewind. What?
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and point out the movie discontinuity that I noticed. I didn't watch it this time because I've watched it like 5 times already in my life, so I didn't see any reason to watch it again. But is not Mardi Gras in February?
Yeah,
Yes.
I wondered that whole.
It's
Yeah.
colder than shit in New Mexico in February.
Yeah,
So there's no way that they could have been there.
and that
It
one
would've
line
been
he says
6
we're 5
months
days
before they would've
away.
gone-
Yeah, 3
Yeah,
days
No,
away.
there's no way. And was there a hot tub scene or a hot spring scene? I think there's one, and that's right outside of Taos. Because when
Yeah,
I was
they jump in the
traveling,
water.
people would.
They're swimming
What?
naked. They're swimming naked
Yeah,
somewhere.
somebody told me, yeah, you could go out to this, go there and go to the hot springs. That's the one they use for Easy Rider. So, but it also had a huge impact on my life. I mean, it made me aware of all that stuff, and coming from a motorcycle family, you would have thought I would have, gotten into it, but motorcycles and I never got along with each other. So
It also
I'd be
reminded
dead
me of
fairly soon.
Billy. It reminded me of Billy Jack. Everybody remember that one? That guy did that all by himself. I mean, that's kind of what Fonda did almost. I mean, came up with the money and went out and shot it and slammed it together, and then it hit every drive-in screen for 5 years, and made him rich.
You got to think about that. The Billy Jack's dad was Joe Jack, and Peter Fonda's dad is Henry Fonda. I think he could come up with the money.
Right. I think he got it from his dad, as a matter of fact,
Yeah.
or it was part of his trust fund or something.
Yeah.
I did read
What-
his autobiography. It
What
was
financial
about,
backing on Easy Rider?
Yeah.
No, it came from a couple of producers who made their first big score in entertainment. Was they produced the Monkees, and those were the guys that bankrolled it.
Terry
Okay.
Southern was part of the monkey thing, wasn't he?
Who?
Terry Southern, didn't he write episodes for the Monkees?
I think maybe he did. Yeah.
Huh.
There's some credentials for you.
I wrote episode 21 and 28 for the Monkey and Easy Rider.
Terry Southern's written quite a few screenplays.
Yeah, and Candy.
Right.
yeah, the book.
It's gonna, yeah,
He wrote Candy.
classic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bill Barnhart would appreciate this. I read the book Candy because my neighbor Glenn Law's mother suggested we would enjoy it. And she gave it to me and I read it, and then I passed it along, and by the time it got passed back, it was so dog-eared and torn up, but she put it back on the shelf there.
Huh.
Did any pages stick together?
No, but it definitely had some burnt. It had some, folded corners on it where people were saving their spot and stuff. Glenn's parents, Art and Charlene Law, they were the coolest parents in the neighborhood. Couldn't you say, Bill?
Yeah.
I want to hear Dr. Copeland's take on this.
Who's?
Um,
Copeland's.
yeah, well, first of all, I agree with you, Gary, about the truth teller role of Jack Nicholson. And he was, even at that point, he had kind of an outrageous edge that was beginning to blossom, which only has come to fruition more and more over time. I was interested in Phil Spector showing up in the first. I thought it was interesting that Karen Black was in there as one of the prostitutes, and then she was with Jack Nicholson in Five Easy Pieces not long after that. So it's kind of, the Hollywood group kind of hangs together in some ways. I thought that I was interested in some of the cinematography stuff that they did. There was this thing that they did where they would sort of jerk back and forth to a scene, and it kind of was disorienting, like maybe a kind of a drug phenomenon or something like that. It was interesting how the guy, I think it was a guy in the commune, that gave him the little tinfoil package, and he said, take this, someplace special or something like that, and they hung on to that until they got to the brothel, and that was an interesting way that they sort of represented the drug experience. That's right. And I was, I can see where it was low budget, but I thought the cinematography was a good representation of the feeling of freedom and getting out there in the midst of America. So I like that part of it. I sometimes hesitate to attach too much social meaning to these kinds of things, but I'm sure they were aware of those things and wanted to speak to the times to some degree. But I think they were, in a way, they were kind of having fun too.
To me, it's like opening up an old drawer and finding a sweatshirt from your middle school age and go, oh yeah, I remember.
I can do that right now.
So
I like to say to people, my t-shirts are older than you are.
Your underwear, that's what I'm doing.
The soundtrack, I thought, played an interesting part in it. And I had no idea that Steppenwolf's song, The Pusher, was written by Hoyt Axton.
Yeah.
He wrote Joy to the World. He wrote Never to Spain. He wrote Ringo's No, No, No song. His mother wrote Heartbreak Hotel. And the Pusher Band, it sounds like a very dark song for Hoyt Axton, because most of his stuff was kind of almost novelty stuff. But it's a dark song, and I had no idea that he wrote that. But the soundtrack, I thought, was, it's got some quality to it, some Hendrix and Dylan and band. And
yeah, I don't think the band is on the soundtrack. I was going to look that up. I think they wouldn't let them use the band, and they put some group named Smith
doing the weight
soundtrack.
Okay, but it's the band song.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh.
I thought it was very reflective of the times.
Oh yeah. The Holy Modal Rounders and Kyrie Eleison. Who is that by?
And that's the guy who does the band that does Don't Bogart That Joint is something like the History of Man, or I don't know.
That sounds right.
So, but anyway, I thought the soundtrack added to the whole point in time reference.
I seem to remember that was the, and I think I read this, that was the first big time successful effort of using pre-released music, and using it as the soundtrack. I mean, afterwards it was done all the time. The first one that comes to my mind, of course, is American Graffiti a few years later. But
Right.
yeah, that was, and as I understand it, if I remember reading this right, the original plan was to have Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and maybe even Neil Young with them, do the score, and they had put down the songs that they have in the movie basically as pacers for whatever Crosby, Stills, and Nash were going to write for them, and then they said, "Yay, this works fine. Let's just stay with these numbers." And so Crosby, Stills, and Nash didn't get the gig.
I think the
I
only
have-
song for the movie was the McGuinn song at the end.
Yeah, wasn't born to follow.
Was
Yeah.
the dispute, was the
Yeah.
dispute between Hopper and Fonda and Southern money? I mean, it made it for $500,000 and made 60 million, and people getting writing credits and directing credits. Was it a money fight or was it a philosophy fight?
I think it was both. It started off. My understanding is it started off as a writing credit fight, and then Southern, who didn't have as much success later on in life as the other two, probably also felt that they owed him a bigger taste to the action.
You know who's known for getting writing credits for just adding a word or two is Phil Spector. I mean,
There you go, yeah.
he's listed as a publisher on stuff he barely had anything to do with, and has taken money from people who should have gotten it, and he took credit for it and took money for it. So there's a connection for you.
I have a Phil Spector story. I listened to the Ramones for a long time and did research and whatever, and he pulled a gun during the Ramones recording session. I don't think he pointed at anybody, but he had a gun out. And then the other story was he made Johnny Ramone play the same lick like 72 times before they finally decided on what to use.
Wow. I don't know if you guys know, but the Kyrie eleison in the Mardi Gras scene was by the Electric Prunes.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
that's
right.
right.
Electric
Right.
Prunes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Don't Bogart was the Fraternity of Man.
Fraternity of Man, yeah.
Roger McGuinn was featured in 3 or 4 songs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that
Birds.
Kyrie eleison was a staple, and it was a staple of Catholic masses at the time.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Didn't
what
they do I Had Too Much to Dream last night?
was the Electric Prunes?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
That was a popular song.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what was it with the religious overtones of the LSD trip? Was it just because they were in a cemetery, or did that have any meaning beyond superficial meaning?
I think it was. I just took it that it was a religious environment. I didn't see anything. Did you?
A lot of people see God when they're on acid, so I don't know if that was part of the idea or not, but
I did read that the drug dealers in the opening scene gave them the LSD. I don't know if you guys remember seeing that part.
I thought it was the guy, the hitchhiker, that gave it to him.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe it was the hitchhiker.
Yeah, no, it was a
That,
hitchhiker.
that had the commune guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So did you were talking about real drugs, Bill. Did the drug dealers get real cocaine to put in those motorcycle fake batteries?
evidently. I mean, that's what that's. I was just reading through that. I just read that for the first time. So evidently, that's part of it. There are a lot of things about this movie to pick apart for sure. I was reading like it was 3 or 4 hours long to start off with. They had to start cutting away all these pieces to it, and I think maybe they lost all the pieces they got rid of. That's a part of the anger too, is that they had a lot that they could have cashed in on, but they.
Yeah, I seem to remember reading that Hopper's cut was damn near 4 hours long, and Fonda, the director, and a couple of the producers said, "Dennis, why don't you go down to Taos, Mexico," where he apparently ended up really liking and lived a lot of his life. But anyway, go down to Taos and stay down there for a while, have a nice time. And they're the guys that went in and whittled it down to an hour and a half movie.
93 minutes, yeah.
Then I also read that those guys, Nicholson and Peter Fonda for sure. I don't know about Hopper. They were doing, is it Roger Corman movies. The the guy that used to do all the kind of
B
thriller.
movies.
What was it? Isn't his name Roger Corman?
Yeah. He did a lot of B movies and a lot of B horror movies.
Yeah, I was surprised. I know a lot of people came through him. I didn't realize Nicholson was one of them.
Also, there were lots of different kinds of motorcycle movies that came out after this. I don't know if you guys remember that, but I remember, going by the screens for the drive-in movies, and it would be motorcycles from hell, motorcycles this, motorcycles that. I'm sure
There was a
everybody was
TV
cashing
series
in.
called the TV series called Then Came Bronson. It was a kind of a lone soul who was out trying to discover America. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but I think it was a spinoff of this.
I didn't remember it until you brought it up. I remember the title.
There was a lot of money made in this one and it had to generate a lot of copycat activity.
Don't forget about Joe Namath and CC Ryder. Oh God, what a travesty. And did you know that the motorcycle was stolen not long after the movie was completed? Within a year or two, somebody stole that chopper and they never did find it.
Yeah, it has a long history. Somebody has found it or had found it.
Really?
It's sold as the most expensive motorcycle ever. It's like $1.25 million.
Fonda's
Makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
They had a replica in Kauai when I visited there in 1999. There was a motorcycle shop there that had an exact replica of the
Hoppers
chopper.
is more routine, but the Captain America's was pretty fancy. Because I've spent so much time in New Mexico, I get a kick out of a lot of the scenes and scenery in the thing, and it was so neat to see when they joined that parade, and they were in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and they go by the hotel where No Country for Old Men was shot.
Ah,
I read also that Peter Fonda was in a Corman movie called The Wild Angels, just like before Easy Rider. So that was his he had a little experience playing this kind of character. Seems like that'd be kind of a good movie to put out there. In fact, I'll throw it out there as a add-on movie for next time.
well, I think you're breaking it down. There were like 10 scenes that kind of drove the story forward. If you put those 10 scenes together, they add up to maybe 30 minutes. So you got to do something. And the bike scenes and the scenery, they hold the whole thing together. So in terms of making a watchable movie with some dialogue and scenes that advance the storyline, a motorcycle movie is the perfect foil for that, because you can helicopters and drones and lots of scenery.
We didn't have drones back then, but that's why I put this shot up, because everybody's used to the fuck you from Hopper. But then all of a sudden there's a helicopter shot, and I'm like, wow, they had money for a helicopter?
Right.
Just one.
One day.
One shot, and they went over it about 3 times, and they got enough. And they said, that'll do.
Yeah, I think in Hopper's cut, let's say there's 7 motorcycle transition scenes in the final cut. He probably had twice that many in it, if I remember what I read right.
That'd be interesting if they could put that back together and say, here's the original director's cut of Easy Rider.
Be a travel log.
Like I said, I think you got lost.
Yeah.
You got lost. I remember there was something, I think, about them going back to one of their parents' house or something early on. So there was a lot of stuff in there.
A lot of film I read, I don't know if it happened here, but they didn't hang on to film. They reclaimed the silver from it. They said, well, we cut this out, so get the silver. We want the money, And the people that try to restore these things, they always complain about nobody really cared, much like all of our public documents are protected by the, the Department of whatever in Washington DC. There wasn't really anything to do to do that in the film industry till about the 1960s or 70s. They started saying, "Hey, man, we need to find some of these old acetates and get them on something else before they blow up."
No,
Let's go back to Jeff Arthur. Jeff, you saw this for the first time. What do you think the movie makers were trying to accomplish?
They were probably trying to make some money, but
Worked.
You think they were trying to make money more than make a statement?
you know, I don't know. I was 6 years old, but I like to keep bringing that up. But I mean, my takeaway was that, you know, I just never want to go to the South. I mean, I have no desire to. I mean, my nephew had just recently been to Savannah, Georgia, and he said it was the coolest place, one of the coolest places he'd ever been. So, you know, I'd like to see it, but, you know, I don't want to go anywhere in the South.
Where are you from?
I was born actually in Wyoming, but my father he was in the Red Cross, and when I was young, and we traveled around quite a bit until I was about 7 or 8 years old. But since that time, I was raised pretty much in Washington State. So
I can promise you that the
And
racism that you
sleep over here tonight.
all right, get out of here. Get out of here.
Come.
the
Sorry.
racism that you perceive in the South is far worse in the Northeast.
really,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well,
You should not be afraid of traveling in the South. It's much more tolerable there than you would see in the Northeast.
And you're white, so in the South, that's okay.
well, it wasn't okay for these guys, but they were, you know, hippies, I guess, was the problem.
It's a movie, and two, it's 1969.
Yeah.
Well, long hair was not looked on as a nice thing. You know, long-haired hippies should not apply. Now the sign says, "Anybody we can get, please apply."
Right.
But there was a whole
Yeah.
song called
What if
"Signs
I was
Everywhere."
transgender, or if I was gay, or like to dress in drag?
Then don't come to Missouri.
Yeah, I was going to say, I could give you a long list of states that'll be less welcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't go to Florida either.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, or Sarasota, especially, unless you want malaria.
You know, I don't know when I was in the South for 2 years, in the late 1970s, I saw a good bit of racism in this little town of Wilmington, North Carolina, where I was at. When I returned there 30 years later on several vacations, one of the things that struck me was I saw two college kids walking across the street in downtown Wilmington. One was black, one was white, and they were holding hands. They were clearly a boyfriend and a girlfriend. And I thought to myself at that time, well, this little place has come a long way, because I thought it was a very provincial, very Dixie little redneck town when I was there in the 1970s. So, and Wood's point about there being a lot of racism in the Northeast is on point as well. You can't go to many cities more bigoted than Boston, Massachusetts.
Thanks, Jeff. I love your perspective that you saw this now instead of then, because this movie occurred when we were all just coming out of the egg and becoming aware of things, and you know, it tattooed us.
before
And
we
it's
went
interesting
to
to go
college,
back and look at it now.
before we went to college, really, you know, it's
Yeah,
Oh, it was a high school thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I'd seen the ending before. I'd forgotten about it though, so that even shocked me that happened, even though I'd seen it before. But I'd never seen the part where they were sleeping and they all got beat to hell with whatever it was, baseball.
I think
bats.
everybody on this Zoom, other than you, we were probably freshmen or sophomores in high school, and we were just seeing everybody's older brothers go to Vietnam and not come back, or seeing people that graduated the year before go to Vietnam and not come back. And, you know, we were suddenly aware of a lot of things that we thought, oh shit, this could be our lives. And so movies like this that spoke to, you know, a counterculture, or you don't have to comply, or you should question whether you comply. This was one of those benchmark movies that probably got us all thinking. That's why it's interesting to go back and look at it now, because you know, we were probably worried about different things, zits and, you know, girlfriends and notes and classrooms and things like that. And we're thinking about war. But this was one of those movies that kind of shocked us awake.
Yeah. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I vividly remember by the time 1970, the spring of 1970 comes along, I'm beginning to let my hair grow, and I caught shit in my hometown from the greasers for letting my hair grow. So I mean, you could feel it changing in good and bad ways.
Yeah, like people in high schools and stuff like that were starting to grow their hair out longer, you know, and all that. And there was like the jocks, there were the hippies. Even beginning in high school, you could see it transforming the high schools we all went to, I'm sure.
Well,
Yeah,
that
the
was
greasers.
that was the crucible. If you were a jock and you had long hair, if you wanted to stay a jock, you had to cut your hair, or you could be a jock, or you could be an ex-jock with long hair, but you had to choose a path.
Your coach would never let you keep it.
That's right.
Yeah.
The movie
Terry
also
had long hair,
highlights.
didn't you? No, just a second, guys. Terry, didn't you have long hair and play?
Oh, no,
No? Okay.
no, it really didn't come until I got to Drake. And
Tom kind of did.
who?
Pritchard.
Oh, he did. Yeah.
What I was going to say was the movie also highlighted the hitchhiker and the communal just dropout culture. It made quite a bit of that, and Peter Fonda seemed to grow very attached to it. I actually thought you could see in a point in the movie where he'd come back to that.
Well, I
Yeah,
think Dennis Hopper was right in that there was nothing going to grow in that dirt.
Yeah.
Jeff Arthur, my guess is 7 of the 8 people on this Zoom hitchhiked a lot in college, and you probably wouldn't even think about it now. Well, I'm not sure I would think about it now. Of course, who would pick up a 70-year-old man now? But I'm pretty sure everybody on this Zoom hitchhiked while we were in college and never thought anything about it.
I hitchhiked a lot.
I did too.
Yeah, me too. I
I
hitchhiked
hitchhiked
from
one time
St. Louis to New Orleans one time.
on the island of Kauai. I hitchhiked with my my stepsister at the time. We hitchhiked from the airport to the Nepali coast and spent a week there. So that was my kind of hippie outing of my lifetime.
I did it as recently as 2018 on the Big Island.
Yeah.
And other than a bus, I hadn't been there for like, God, 7 or 8 years. Other than the tourist bus that picked me up, everybody else that picked me up, I knew.
Well, I did it last month in Miami, but I had to pay for it. It's called Uber, and totally different experience.
I mean, I remember, I think this movie gave rise to Thornhill and I hitchhiking to California and Phoenix and back. And I know I hitchhiked to Missoula by myself and back. That'll scare you. And that was in the good times.
All right, guys. Well, it's 7:55.
Well, we
Yeah.
enjoyed the movie, Bill. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
It was fun.
Hey,
I
anybody have a chance to watch the Bear season 2 episode 3 or 4, I was
6.
6, is that what it was? That I
Yep.
recommended to everybody?
Incredible.
That, if you don't watch anything else, I
What-
still
what-
highly recommend
Yeah,
it.
but
Where's it streaming?
Hulu.
Hulu.
It is really, that is really a great episode.
It's also on FX. It's FX on Hulu kind of thing.
Okay.
But yeah, I've never seen anything like it in all these streaming, 8-part series or whatever.
Is that the Jamie, whatever, what's her name?
Jamie Lee
Jamie
Curtis.
Lee Curtis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it wrong there, but
Season 2,
There's a
episode
whole
2.
lot of guests.
season 2.
All right.
Anything else anybody's got that's worth taking a look at?
I'm going through Black Mirror based
Yeah, I
on
am
your
too.
hierarchy of most watched or most, the highest rated Black Mirror episodes.
I've just been jumping around, just
Yeah.
catch one here, catch one there.
I've got one more I'd like to recommend, and it's called The Lobster. Has anybody ever seen that?
I've heard about it. No.
2014. It stars Colin Farrell, and it's a dystopian story about people who, if you don't have a partner, they send you to this place to find a partner, and you have 40 days to do it. And if you don't, you become an animal. They turn you into an animal. And it's kind of like the Inisherin movie, although Gleason's not in it, but Colin Farrell plays it fantastically. And it's a dystopian movie gone awry is what it is. And it's one of those, I think, that just got by everybody in 2014. But it's out there if you guys, I think it's on Max, as a matter of fact.
Well, let us not forget about the big movie pick for next week.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
who's got that?
Is it Barbie?
That'd
No.
be nice. I don't think it's going to be out next week, though. It's a couple
That's
more
right.
for Barbie.
Is it Copeland?
You're muted.
You're muted, Jeff.
Yeah, there's
There
some
you go.
kitchen noise going on here. So sorry. Interestingly, this movie has already been mentioned, and it's The Last Detail, which is a 1973 comedy drama by Hal Ashby, screenplay by Robert Towne, and Jack Nicholson, Otis Young, Randy Quaid, Clifton James, and Carol Kane. So I will just put it out there.
Yeah.
And we can talk about it as we get together.
All right.
One more mention on The Bear season 2, they have unbelievable cameos, and one of them is Jamie Lee Curtis, and one of them is Robert Towne, and Bob Odenkirk. They've just got all kinds of people sitting in for different things.
John Mulvaney, isn't that his name?
Well,
Yeah.
he's in that one with Jamie Lee Curtis,
Yeah.
and they've got others along the way. Olivia Colman plays a chef from a place in I think in Europe. I'm not sure, but anyway, everybody has all these great little cameos, and you go, "Oh wow!" And then I don't know, it just adds something more to it.
Yeah, that show just got better and better, I thought.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Great to
I'm
see
done.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Terry,
guys.
I enjoy your
Welcome
Northern
back.
Lights. Where are they? Where are you? Terry, where's your Northern Lights scene from?
I don't know.
It's
Okay.
supposed to hit, by the way, on Thursday, we're supposed to get hit with another geomagnetic storm.
Right.
That is a big one. It's like a 9 on a 10 scale or something, and it's supposed to hit 16, 17 states.
Yeah,
Are you going to be able to see it?
Maybe able to see it in Missouri.
Yeah.
You might.
Yeah.
The problem here for me always is it's fucking cloudy all the time. I get all excited and I think about these things, and
Yeah,
if you go at 3
you
o'clock
gotta-
in the morning,
I
the
think you gotta
clouds
get
will spread out, and then somebody will get it. But
I think you got to get up in the middle of the night and probably have a decent horizon to see it if it comes to south as Missouri. So. Okay,
All right.
guys.
Hey, guys.
Jeff Arthur, your assignment next week. Where do you live now?
I live in Mount Vernon, Washington.
Is to hitchhike to Portland.
Hey, who's got next week's pick? Donna?
I have to, I don't, probably, yeah.
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 That would be
Indeed.
good. See you guys.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Everybody let
Just
Donna know.
Put it in your minutes or something.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
See ya.